Hmm.
Oh, Bill, I'm so happy to see you this evening when we're going to be discussing our most recent topic. Remind me what it is again?
uh, Les corpse à vendre.
Oh,
That's the best I can do with French. No, I have no idea how to pronounce that in French, other than
wow.
les corps, what?
À vendre.
Vendre. Yeah, I wouldn't know that. What
Do you
does
know
that
what it
mean?
means?
I have no idea.
Well, body for sale.
Oh, I see. Okay. Corpse for sale, vendre. Right, got it.
Um, this is actually quite an old one that I've had up my sleeve for a while because you, Bill, have been a rogue and
Yes, that's
didn't
that's what
show
I've
up
been.
for our last show. So this is our last show, but now. So anyway, this now is maybe quite old news, although I think the entirety of it is current and is always current, sadly. It came up because I have been thinking about this lady,
Sure.
um, and the title in French because Gisèle Pelicot is a French woman who you may have heard of or may not. Certainly in France, she has lit up the world. Actually, the world of France has lit up women all over France in a kind of
Hmm.
rage and resistance. Because she is the woman who discovered that her husband of 50 years had been secretly drugging her and inviting others to rape her the past 10 years in their family home while she
Yep.
slept and was unconscious.
Which is some really dark stuff.
Yes. As a news story, as something to consume, uh, it just stunned me, as I think it has done everybody else. And the thing that makes her so important is the way she has bravely waived her right to anonymity so that the entire trial would be exposed. And because of that, the men involved would be exposed. And most particularly, what happens during such a trial. And of course, almost playing into her hands, it has been noted by most watching and sensible people that she who is victim is she who is shamed. And part of her mantra has been that through this process, where she is inside a ruin, she actually wants to chip away and work at shifting shame in such cases from the victim to the accused.
Who do you think is shaming her?
Well, I mean, we hear about this happening all the time in rape trials where women are asked what they've been wearing, or, questions, I think in her case, in the courtroom, questions about her sex life with her husband, and attempting to foist particular sexual peccadillos on her to justify the actions of her husband. Um, and in a way, I guess, degrade her enough that it would seem that in the minds of those listening, the jury particularly, of course, that she
Sure.
would be, um, you know, a woman who took sex easily, or, even the language around it is really interesting when we think about how we then should be at a point in our society where a woman's sexual preferences are not then reason to blame her for ugly actions, yet they are. Even if Giselle Pellicot had been a woman who enjoyed threesomes and wife swapping and role playing and
Hmm.
rape fantasies, even if that were all true, and it may be, but and if it were, that shouldn't then be a justification for heinous crime
I,
against.
I agree. I mean, the people who are shaming her in your sense are probably his lawyers, right? Is that the argument?
Yes, and the
Yeah, I
lawyers
mean,
who
that's the only defense they're going to have, right? Otherwise, they got him dead to rights, you know.
well,
Um,
for people who are not familiar with this, this has been in the certainly the French press for the last 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And the story came about, as I said, this woman has waived her right to anonymity. Normally, such trials happen behind closed doors in private. She was called to the police station with her husband. They live in a small town called Mazan in Provence, south of France. They've lived there for just over 10 years, I think, in retirement. Nice middle class family, parents to 3 kids, grandkids, and so on. Completely on the outside, very normal, so called. And they were called into the police station because he, the husband, Dominique Pelicot, had been caught taking photographs of women's skirts in a supermarket. And when they arrived at the police station, Gisèle, was taken into a separate room because looking at her husband's hard drive, they had discovered thousands of images of her being raped.
mhm.
And there are at least 87 men identified from these photographs and videos that her husband would make. Um, and it just has brought up so much stuff for me about, the body, who has the right to the body,
Hmm.
who owns the body, is my body my body? And that's both in a physical sense, my body belongs to me, but actually, who does it belong to at different ages and stages? Who does it belong to in the eyes of a wider society, or because of my conditions in the West, or because of my gender, or any of that stuff? I found it incredible to think that so many men arrived at a house and would believe that the unconscious woman on the bed enjoyed this way of having sex without questioning it.
Sure. Or they did question it, but they were sleazy, terrible people.
Well, again, it's really difficult to sort of straddle this in a way that's not about judging those people who have those particular sexual idiosyncrasies.
Well, yeah, but
That's
I'm just
not for
saying, like,
me.
if you had talked to her before she was drugged and she said, "Yes, I'm really into getting drugged and being raped," like, okay. But if they didn't, then they were just taking the husband's word for it. It's interesting to me because at least in the United States, this case has taken a uh, has been very sympathetic towards her, entirely sympathetic towards her. Like there was, I haven't even heard about any of the arguments that her lawyers have been making either in the press or in the courtroom um, in the United States. So there's also a cultural aspect to all of this, right? Like what's it like in France versus the UK versus America versus, somewhere else.
Well, I think all these things are very nuanced because our cultural conditions are such that, even you and I speaking the same language are not really speaking the same social language all that often.
It's
Uh,
true. I don't understand what you're talking about half the time.
um, anyway, I'm also very conscious that I've brought you here this evening and we're talking about this on our little show where normally we're
Mhm.
looking at paintings and photographs and so on. Uh, Um, the reason why I put this here is because I do think there's a philosophical issue around ownership of the body
Mhm.
and a kind of self appreciation or a self actualization about what our bodies mean. Uh, and this is not in any way to diminish this case because I hope that people watching, if they haven't read about this person and they haven't read about this case, might go and find out more and also see the incredible movement, mainly amongst women in France, to celebrate this woman, not because of the crimes committed against her, but in spite of them and how dignified she's been through the torture of such a kind of disturbing exposure.
I mean, it's also interesting. I mean, I guess it's also a note of change. 50 years ago, she probably wouldn't have been public, wouldn't have wanted to be public. probably would have had more public shaming about it all even decades ago compared to now, you know. So there's always, I always like to also think about the progress that has been made over time. You know, like a woman, this woman felt comfortable enough to be public about this in a way to say, you know, the heck with you people who did this to me. I don't, you know, I'm not ashamed of who I am and whatnot, and I'm the victim here, not anything other than that. So it's just interesting.
Well, you know, this is also about a scrutiny of women, and especially of women's bodies. Now, funnily enough, the two artists I've included are male and using their own bodies often as medium.
Mm-hmm.
But just to begin, I wanted to look at Gisèle with you on the screen. I wanted our viewer to see Gisèle's face. I wanted people to know who she is. And I want to ask the question, who does the body belong to? And what is the violation of the body really about?
Is there any answer to that question other than it belongs to the person whose body it is?
Well, yeah, of course, there's the Christian view that the body belongs to God,
Yeah. Okay.
right? I mean, there's um, the sense that, you know, the body is a worshipful form, as in the body is there just to be a way of worshiping God. Um, I think
You
it's
think within your own within your own brain or within the group?
what do you mean, Bill?
Uh, you know, you and I can look at 1,000 statues that we all look at and point to. I mean, look at the statue of David that Michelangelo did. That is I mean, obviously a fictitious body, or at least a body that Michelangelo, he must have used somebody as a model for that. Um, you know, that is a object that millions of people over the last 500 years have stared at as a idealized figure, you know.
Sure.
Um,
I mean, does art peddle the body in a way
of
that
course.
is, you know, immoral?
Well, I mean, morality is a cultural question, a religious question. I mean, I will tell you that, you know, if anyone goes on any social media, you will find lots of really good looking people having pictures of themselves half dressed, and they have tons of followers because people want to stare at people who are half naked, right? So, I mean, we are just wired this way. Um,
But I think what I'm looking at though is this idea of the body for sale.
yeah.
The
Is,
body.
is, is it okay to peddle your own body, as it were?
Well, yes, and that's the distinction, isn't it?
And at that point, do you still own it?
Well, these are all the questions around what I look at. And
Yeah.
again, this isn't to in any way draw a comparison or make a connection between Gisèle Pelicot and somebody who chooses to sell their own body.
Yep.
Um, you know, a sex worker
Sure.
chooses that life, let's say, maybe not always, but sometimes. Um, a glamour model may choose to present their body to the world in a way that sexualizes it, beautifies it, makes it consumable. But it's interesting that Pellicot's husband perhaps felt that he owned her. He owned her body. And actually, historically, my body would have been my father's, and my body would
Just,
have been property.
right. To sell to, yes, historically, that's true.
So,
And, but I mean, even her husband in this case, did he really believe that? Or it just that he, you know, couldn't control his terrible urges. Like, did he actually think that he had the right to do this? Or, you know, if I go in and steal money from a bank, I might not think that I have the right to that money, but I'm going to do it anyway because, you know, I want the money.
Mm. Well, I don't know the answer to that question actually,
Yeah.
and I need to say that, you know, be very careful with that. But again, it's something that I've thought about a lot in reading about this case and following along. I mean, she said that she felt as if she had been sacrificed on the altar of vice, and that though she is, you know, steely in her resolve on the surface, inside she's a field of ruins. She
Mm-hmm.
used very emotive language to describe how she feels in the body that has been so misused. And it's very physical description she gives. You know, sacrificed on an altar,
Sure.
field of ruins. So powerful.
Can I ask a question though?
Mm.
I mean, she is also in a legal case right now. The statements that she makes publicly are potentially to her benefit in the legal case. Do you trust every word she says as you're assuming that everything she's saying is entirely true and not a way to, you know, muster public opinion to her side of the case, you know?
I see what you mean, but I'm also very conscious that this is a woman who had evidence presented to her, as if actions to her were external from
Sure.
her.
Yeah.
All I mean is that the profoundly shocking thing is that the violation was so frequent and had so many perpetrators.
Mm-hmm.
So I've felt a little bit like her body has been an external instrument.
Sure. Plus, she wasn't there in the sense that she was unconscious at the time.
Mm.
I mean, I'm not, listen, I think all these people should be taken out and castrated. All I'm saying is that just from a point of view of, you know, public statements, both her husband, her detractors, and herself are both playing public sentiment to their side, right? Like we have to, if we're going to trust one is the truth, we also have to trust that the other is the truth. Or say that there's spin on all sides, and that's the whole game in these kinds of situations. You know, there's
I
public
mean,
relations
the
at work.
husband has owned up.
Yeah.
More interesting are the hordes of men who are now being tried as rapists,
Yep.
who are saying that they did not know they were
They
raping
didn't know
her.
that they were raping. Yeah. Man, I'm going to start making weird nude self-portrait art.
It seems rather a disconnect now, the seriousness of what we've just been discussing. And this is very serious too, actually. Andrew Carnie.
I didn't mean to like make light of it. I'm just saying. Seems like fun. You always have a subject.
Well, this is from Hybrid Bodies and it's the Heart Project. Andrew Carnie is a really, really interesting person. I've met him. I invited him to school actually, and he came. I was very impressed. He teaches at Winchester College of Art. He's been practicing as an artist for a long time. He's a very well-respected lecturer. But he does a lot of work that sort of fuses art and science and a kind of investigative art making. And in this case, it was about people who had heart transplants. And he works over several years, both with people who have received transplant and also with families. That's called something different. If you go on his website, you see two different strands to the same project. And just as a thing, you know, the image making is very interesting. He's multidisciplinary. He works in a variety of different modes using different methods. Often it's projection or photography, videography. Sometimes it's other forms of kind of installation, something sculptural or drawn. It's could be anything. But what's fascinating about it is that we're brought up to the space of the body that is not ours,
Yeah.
to, I guess, to see a potential of what our body is and can do, not least because our body might be a receiver or it might be a giver. Um, and I think it's fascinating to consider what it's like for somebody to have another human heart within them.
I think organ transplant in general. I have a good friend who, not that unrecently, had a bone marrow transplant,
Mm.
stem cells, and so she has somebody else's blood coursing through her veins. Like her blood's DNA is different than her DNA,
Mm.
and it's got to be, there's got to be just this weird sense of, yeah, is that my blood, or is that my heart? Is that, it's the thing keeping me alive. So, and it's inside my body. So yes, it's mine, but it was someone else's, quite literally.
Mm.
It's kind of it's a
That
crazy thought.
also, you're thinking again though about a body for
Sorry, 1 second.
sale. Oh gosh, Amazon again, Bill.
If I don't answer, this is going to keep buzzing.
Whilst Bill is answering the door, we seem to be doing
Sorry.
this rather a lot, watchers.
Go ahead.
Oh,
Sorry.
anyway, the body for sale. Um, thinking about, in death. I mean, the Human Tissue Authority actually, I think, owns the body.
Okay, that's probably a matter of where you die, but yes, okay.
But also thinking about
Jurisdictional
transplant
angle, I guess.
and how one's organs can be removed from one's body and taken somewhere else based on a little donor card or a family's word.
My new license, I did not say that I was an organ donor, in fact. I'm going to let my wife decide that if and when it comes.
Another human heart.
Would you give up your organs?
Yes. But what I've always realized is that after my death, really, I don't care. It's only
Yeah,
me living, thinking about it that makes me squeamish or makes me feel
sure.
sad or that kind of thing.
Well, the problem with organ transplant though is that they kind of have to do it when you're not exactly dead. You know, that's the tricky part.
Mm.
Which is this real gray area of, like, in that case, you are no longer there. You're brain dead. Your body's still cooking. And somebody says, we need Sandy's heart to save Ginny's heart over here.
Mm.
Whose heart is it at that point? Is it still yours? Or, like you said, is this some authority's heart?
Do I give authority over my body ever to anyone else?
I
And
think the answer is yes, you do.
the answer is yes, I do all the time in all different ways, actually.
If you're put under for surgery, who's
Yep.
in charge of your body then?
I'm also conscious, even things like, flying on an airplane or, I'm
Sure.
putting my body in the hands of someone else.
Yep.
Mm. Anyway, Andrew Carnie's work. I'm only showing one slide of one section, but actually there's a very complex web of work that's really, really interesting, in my opinion. And I would recommend everybody to go and have a look.
I will go take a look.
And just to finish, Stelarc.
Ugh, that's freaky.
So he started this in 1996, right? And this is then calling into question again a kind of moral issue about, if I have full ownership of my body, can I do to it whatever I want?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, again, in the news very recently, somebody arrested because of the death pod that's just been unveiled to assist with dying. And, you know, whether we think that assisted dying should be allowed, or if it is actually a
Is
crime.
that legal anywhere in the UK?
No,
People go to Switzerland or wherever to do this, right?
they
In the EU.
do. I mean, assisted dying is legal, isn't it, in Canada?
It's legal in America, in Oregon and Vermont, I think.
Hmm.
I mean, there are myriad situations where I would say, I don't want to live anymore. You know, all kinds of terrible things that could be. A friend of mine, her sister has ALS. It's like she's just slowly deteriorating. It's like she shouldn't have to suffer through that until her body shuts down naturally if she doesn't want to. You know, and
That's
that I mean, you could go all the way from whether or not you can tell somebody they can't put a certain chemical in their body, like drugs or something, right? All the way up to assisted suicide.
yes, and even just in our day to day. I mean, in the UK, we have a hefty sugar tax to stop me from consuming so much sugar.
I
Um,
even noticed in Spain last week that whenever I ordered a Coke, they would say Coke Zero, and I would say no, you know, original, Coke Classic. It's almost like they had some legal responsibility to offer me the sugar-free version before the sugar version.
well, yes, I mean, this is the
But
kind
they'll
of,
but they'll but they'll give me all the wine I want,
right, but
right?
there's a kind of lunacy in this, isn't there? Because we're being corralled in a particular direction.
Sure.
Governance of our body is given over, and when people
But if
complain
that
that
but if
they,
that governance is happening in a democratic process, it's not like it's, you know, some mindless thing making those decisions, right?
I think that for my own part, I need to be aware that what I consume, use, and apply to my body, with my body, that I'm sure I know why I'm doing those things or why I cannot do those things, where the instruction or condition comes from. And I suspect a lot of people are not thinking about why it is that, you know, we are not doing certain things. Like the Coke Zero one is actually quite a good example. It's not that I want to, you know, douse myself in syrup or something. It's that actually I feel that I ought to have the liberty to eat what I want.
Yeah. And
And
if Coke Zero is the only option, you really might as well just stop drinking soda entirely because it tastes terrible.
that's something different, Bill. But anyway, Stella, the thing I want to tell you about it is about this kind of
Modification thing.
body modification and what he describes as alternate anatomical architecture. So the Ear on Arm project, so started in 1996. Coming up, he's going to be in a position that I think at the moment there is probably a little receiver, a microchip in it, because after
Mm-hmm.
20 years of it being on the arm, it was going to be structurally sound enough that he could put the chip in so people could listen in to him. And now I think he's working towards, or it may already have happened, that he will put a little device in it so that it's kind of like Wi-Fi enabled or whatever. You can constantly be with Stelarc through the ear on his arm.
That is some pretty nerdy stuff. Okay. Would you actually listen to that ever?
Maybe.
Is this the kind of thing that it's like the point he's making is more important than him actually making the point?
Well, I wonder about the shock in it.
Sure, there's a huge amount of shock in it.
I know as a performance artist, um, he's interested not in the kind of gory, but in the in the science fiction
Sure.
of the body. I mean, we could have had Gunther von Hagens on this show. The ownership of the dead body being plasticized and put on display for
Hmm.
to see the marvels of how a body twists and rotates in the middle of a leap towards a basketball hoop or some such thing. Um, Body as living sculpture, again, I use the word morality. Should we be allowed to modify our bodies at all? Is there something sacred about the body that we miss when we change it? And yet here I am, a person who gladly takes the medicines I'm given to help ease an autoimmune condition, or there's so
And you
much
put holes
in.
in your ears, and you put, you know what I mean? Like we do all kinds of weird stuff to
Yes,
ourselves.
pluck my eyebrows, dye my hair.
Yep.
Lots of stuff about vanity comes up
Wait,
in this.
what's your natural hair color then? Take it off slime. Um, the Yeah, it is. I mean, and then, but someone could say that, that gets into the sort of group individual ownership idea that if your body is sacred in some ways, it becoming what you want it to become is you worshiping your own body in the way that you want to, right?
But I wonder if my body is your body. If we all have equal status as bodies,
Do
well,
we?
do we? Do we?
I mean, there's plenty of people who are born deformed or people who have lost. I'm just saying that like all bodies are different, even if the ownership is, you know what I mean? It's like it's fuzzy math.
Yes, and there seems to be too much conflict in it. That
Sure. There's also a lot of people who bodies, it almost seems like they want to do things to their bodies to make the point that they own their own body. It's almost like it's a reaction, not an action.
all of this, though, I mean, coming from the first slide about Gisèle Pelicot, I want to look at whether I am my body, and if I'm not, if my body is just truly the vessel,
Mm-hmm.
of course it matters what happens to it. I want to understand really I'm separate from my body.
You want that to be true?
No, I want to understand it. I want to really be able to think about it with clarity. And I think
Well,
so
here,
many things in our culture muddy that questioning.
sure. Well, the
Am I
question is, I
separate
mean,
from my body?
your mind that is in your body now at 40 blah 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 that you are is technically the same mind that was in your body at 20 something or 10, right? But obviously your body has changed a lot over the last 20, 30 years. But your mind is still there, somewhat in the same way. But you could also, your mind could go and your body's still there.
Yeah.
There's plenty
But
of
also
people,
another body has come through my body as well.
yeah, which is a whole other ball of wax.
Then I wonder, you know, some people might say that my child's body is mine.
Well, at least half of it is.
Anyway, I could go round in a loop about this all the time. I would urge people to go and find out who Gisèle Pelicot is. See her, say her name.
Are there any photographs of her without her sunglasses on? I always see the sunglasses picture.
Yes, there are a few.
I'm
Oh,
just curious what to see her eyes look like.
what a funny thing, Bill.
Seeing what their eyes look like?
Well, I wonder what purpose there is in that. Are you trying to
Uh,
unearth a suspicious edge or something?
no, I just like people's eyes. Eyes are important.
Well, with that, good night.
Good night.